God bless America. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Given that it's the most American day of the year, I thought why not celebrate it with one of the most American games I've ever played, Metal Wolf Chaos. Oh yeah, this is an interesting game. Released in 2004, Metal Wolf was a mecha third-person shooter set in America, but released exclusively in Japan. Also exclusive to the Xbox. Yeah, a game only on Xbox, only available in Japan. That is a combination I don't think I've ever seen before. Now, the Xbox tried really hard to be loved by Japanese gamers, which is why there were so many deals made with noteworthy Japanese studios and developers. FromSoft was among them, reached out to by Microsoft to make them an action game just for the console, which was fitting because FromSoft had a lot of experience not just making console shooters, but games for the Xbox as well. And that's how we ended up with Metal Wolf. What I find hilarious about FromSoft is just how much their image as a company has changed in like the last 10 or so years. Today, people look at them as a big AAA studio that makes critically acclaimed Souls games. But back when I first heard of them, they were the little Japanese developer that made goofy mech games. Dark Souls, Bloodborne? Nah. Armored Core and Mirakumo. However, Armored Core 6 is slowly on its way. Matter of fact, it's coming out in a couple months. So I thought the timing couldn't have been more perfect. It's July 4th, and I get to talk about one of FromSoft's most unique and weird games. Now, is it just Armored Core but with a red, white, and blue paint job, or is there something more to Metal Wolf that makes it stand out even almost 20 years later? Well, let's see for ourselves. Let's party!
Welcome to the White House.
The game's premise is actually pretty dystopian at a first glance. It's set in the not too distant future, where a military coup has essentially seized control of the entire country, including its cities and apparently most branches of government. But the only person left to fight back is the president himself, Michael Wilson, 47th president of the United States. The first level of the game has the military attack the White House, where the president breaks out a secret weapon, his own personal mech suit. But it turns out that as he's fleeing, the leader of the coup d'etat forces turns out to be none other than his own vice president, Richard Hawke. So with the country under enemy occupation, it's up to Michael and his fellow resistance members to take the country back, city by city. That's the premise. I like for how goofy as the premise is, there's a real hint of darkness in the setting. Like, you aren't just fighting faceless bad guys. You are literally fighting the US military. You have to destroy American soldiers and officers and commanders who legitimately think that you're the one going crazy for fighting them. There are fellow mech pilots you come up against who are disappointed in how you used to be a hero to them.
You've tarnished the good name of the US military and your reputation as a hero.
One level, you have to stop a Navy general who used to be your commander.
But I can tell you this, you're public enemy number one.
Hell, Richard, the big bad who's orchestrating everything here, it's kind of your fault that he's in that position in the first place. He was literally your running mate. Again, the game is goofy, but this setting is a pretty horrific one to live in. Like, at this point, what are you even saving the US from? Itself? Its own military? God, I'm probably just reading too much into it.
I'm not the hero type. I'm just doing my job as president.
But yeah, after a kick-ass opening, we get our map, and this is where the game truly begins. The game itself has a pretty simple structure. You start off on the west coast, and you have to go east, securing cities and states as you fight the now corrupted US military. In this regard, the game can get pretty non-linear. Through most of the game, you can pick and choose between 3 or 4 missions at any time. Like the first half of the game, you can access all the missions on the west coast, but once you beat those, you can then access the missions on the east. But in each of these parts of the game, you're free to tackle each mission in any order you please. This is also important as each mission can differ majorly in how difficult they are, what objectives you need to complete, and more specifically, what weapons you need for the job. Some missions are timed, some missions are boss fights, some require you to use long-range weaponry, others require you to use explosives. The fact that it isn't linear in parts lets you experiment and try out easier missions first. Once you do beat a level, you unlock a trove of goodies. It gets you lots of money and rare metal, which you need to both develop and research new weapons. You can find and rescue POWs values with a variety of different rewards for doing so. If you collect scientists, that'll increase your science rating, which increases the amount of rare metal that you collect in every level. And the more POWs that you collect in general, the higher your economy rating goes up, which means that you get more money for each mission. Also, hilariously, you can rescue musicians who will unlock special music tracks in the main menu. On top of that, you can find secrets in the levels themselves, hidden stashes of rare metal, or even high-level weapons that you can equip from your garage, even if you don't have them researched or developed yet. This can unlock some pretty good weapons early on. And yeah, this kind of gives you a big incentive for just going back and replaying old missions, usually to find what you missed, maybe to collect more money or some hidden unlock, or just to redo it again for a better score. Hey, you can do a mission over and over too, but you'll still gain more money. Hell, that is a viable strategy that even I resorted to at one point. Just get some extra money and put that into weapon research. Although make sure to choose the right levels to grind in, because these stages can be big. Lots of set pieces, multiple objectives, tons of nooks and crannies to explore. This doesn't seem like a problem until you die, because guess what? There is no checkpoint system whatsoever. You die in a mission, you gotta restart it. Except dying in a mission can include falling to your death. And there are some bullshit areas too. This fucking Grand Canyon level, all of these bridges are destructible, and when I first played, I did not know that. Yeah, thanks. Well, time to redo the entire level. Yeah, if there's one thing I don't miss from old console games, it's not having access to quick saves or checkpoints. I did compare this game to Armored Core, and the comparison isn't technically unwarranted. Armored Core was kind of used as the basis for the gameplay, with a lot of new features and mechanics built around it. FromSoftware did, however, really want this game to feel distinct from Armored Core. Not only are you smaller as a mech, but you're also slower. Armored Core 2 and 3 weren't too dissimilar from that, but the boost that you have in Metal Wolf Chaos is very short. You can kind of glide around quickly, but your energy runs out very fast. You'll be on foot most of the game, running very slowly. Also, another big feature of Metal Wolf are the guns. You can have up to 8 weapons on you at any time, although a few weapons like sniper rifles will take up 2 slots, so use them sparingly. At all times, you are dual wielding 2 guns, and which weapons you have available for what hand does become pretty important, because you simply can't swap a weapon from your right hand to your left hand. You have to have your left and right weapons set before you even start the level. So you typically want to have each hand evenly balanced. This also means that when you run low on ammo for one gun, you can use the other one in your other hand instead. Or you can simply mix and match to keep your weapon strategy flexible as the mission progresses. What I'm saying is you don't want to have one hand full of all of your best weapons and the other hand full of your garbage. Like I said, you have to research weapons with cash, but then you actually have to build them with additional cash and rare metal. Now let me say that given the length of this game, you will not be able to max out each weapon's category research before you finish it. So you do have to be conscious about what you spend your money on researching and building. You gotta focus. I didn't give too much thought into my inventory when I first played it. I made sure that I had machine guns, a couple longer range assault rifles, and then rockets and grenade launchers. And I seemed to get by pretty fine. I just made sure to buy higher level gear whenever I could. So rest assured, picking the right loadout can be done with just common sense. If I had to make recommendations, don't bother with the shotguns or the sniper rifles. The shotguns themselves are fucking terrible. They're shit against any vehicle, and their damage falls off a cliff the farther away an enemy is, even if you upgrade it a few times. As for sniper rifles, well, you can just find them on the level. The best sniper rifle that I found, I got entirely for free, so don't even bother spending money on it. I'd say assault rifles are a good weapon to invest early on, especially the SG-552. I was shocked at how much these things carried me throughout the game, but as you start coming up against timed missions or boss fights, investing in rocket launchers, grenade launchers, missile launchers, and especially miniguns becomes pretty important. Although, hey, if you don't have the resources available, just replay a mission. You can easily farm for money and metal if you're willing to grind. Which I will say, I think Phoenix is the best level to do that on. Also, a neat touch that I love with Metal Wolf is how they shamelessly use real-life weapons. All the early guns for each category are just straight-up real-life guns. Smith & Wesson pistols, MP7s, Remingtons. It's definitely a little silly seeing you fighting sci-fi mechs while wielding pretty old 20th century Cold War guns, but I'd be lying if I said that it is not cool as fuck to be able to dual-wield M4A1s as you defend America. Hell yes. This is actually a recurring thing in the game, where despite the sci-fi tech, there's an abundance of real-life American military hardware. You're constantly fighting Abrams tanks or Blackhawks. One level has you avoiding A-10 strafing runs. It does add to the game's Americana flair, I'll give it that. The gunplay itself feels okay. You start off with some pretty weak guns, but once you get better weaponry, the combat does kind of open up. Although even then, some enemies will still remain as bullet sponges, no matter how upgraded your weapons are. Stuff like tanks, mechs, and these annoying fucking guard towers require so much fucking ammo and explosives, it just becomes obnoxious. You can start off with limited ammo, however there are always hidden stashes of it scattered around each stage. If you ever see parked trucks or helicopters, or especially these containers, make sure to smash them. And that's sort of the general flow of the game. You'll constantly encounter groups of enemies, forcing you to choose between rockets or machine guns, while also managing your health from larger, tougher enemies. Then you restock your ammo, and you move on to the next arena. Oh, if I had to make a nitpick, the weapon swapping is way too clunky. What clearly happened here is that they made this really sick looking weapon switch animation, where your guns pop out of these canisters and you can rotate and swap between them. I'll admit it does look fucking cool. However, it's slow to cycle between each side, and you can't shoot while swapping out either hand. It's so clunky that I found myself just not swapping weapons whenever I went into battle, just because it was such a hassle to change guns mid-fight. Although you do have a special ability that charges up after you kill enough enemies, that basically lets you fire off all of your guns and rockets in this huge volley fire, which can pretty much destroy any target or high-level enemy in your crosshairs. You also need to watch out for POW cages, since if you blast them with an explosive, you'll kill all the prisoners inside. Same with using your ground pound. You have to break them open with bullets. But yeah, the movement still feels a little slow. The boost does help, especially in letting you strafe and dodge projectiles, but the energy it has is very short, and you have to let it recharge once you deplete it. So for most fights, you're just going to be slowly walking around. But yeah, the gameplay. A little clunky, but still playable, and I'd say it's still pretty fun. Destruction is good, enemies can be fun to fight, and overall it's a solid little mecha action game. So the gameplay holds up. The graphics are another story. Now, Metal Wolf's visuals have held up as best as they can, but they are definitely still dated. They're dated in that classic 6th gen console game look, which is hard to describe but very distinct. Like, models have high polygon counts but low-res muddy textures. Certain areas are boxy and empty, lighting can be flat, usually non-existent, but levels can be massive and are filled to the brim with props and objects and detail. The 6th gen was notorious for developers trying to stretch the limited hardware to the breaking point, but having to make compromises. That definitely shows through with plenty of levels in Metal Wolf. Some areas feel very dated, especially for 2004. Hell, every now and then this game gives me almost Dreamcast vibes. Alcatraz here was reminding me of something like Sonic Adventure. I should also specify that this isn't how the game originally looked. I'm playing the PC re-release, which is itself a bit of a remaster, improving the graphics in some respects, but calling it a full remaster is a bit of an overstatement. They definitely improved the shaders, I think, and they may have touched up a few textures. I feel like the lighting is a little different, like the image feels a lot more saturated now, or at least clearer. Either way, it's kind of hard to tell the difference between this and the original Xbox version, aside from the resolution. An annoyance I do have with this PC port is that they didn't bother to uncap the frame rate, so we're stuck at 30, which does bite. A game like this has so much going on, levels can be pretty chaotic, so you're constantly juggling between different enemies and targets. Having an unlocked frame rate would have been greatly appreciated. But as it is, the 30 FPS makes the game play and feel a little slower. It's just a pet peeve of mine. Not game breaking, just annoying. I will say that as far as level and details go, Metal Wolf still does a pretty good job. It's a game set across the country, and for the most part, it nails its environments. It uses good color and prop choices, making each level feel distinct and memorable. I remember the orange evening sun of the Grand Canyon, or the cloudy cold level set in the White House lawn, or the sunny Miami Beach. The streets of New York or Beverly Hills are dense with buildings and cars, while Phoenix is turned into a friggin' hilarious Wild West town. Which brings up my next point. Metal Wolf is a fucking hilarious game, and it's well executed comedy too.
Jody, who am I? I'm the president. I always make the impossible possible, and I'm gonna keep on doing so.
The entire game has such a silly premise, yet the developers do everything they can with it. And the entire game is really genuinely funny. I'm not laughing at the game, I'm laughing with it.
Mr. President? Mr. President?
Ah!
I also think what helps is that the developers kinda treat the story seriously, as best as they can. There's a little winking and nodding here and there, obviously, but the devs are running with the concept. The premise of this game is you are the fucking president in a mech suit fighting your vice president, and by God does the game deliver. I also like the inclusion of the news chopper. It's little moments every now and then, but it's probably one of the funnier parts of the game. Where a CNN helicopter, DNN, is constantly tailing you and is lying about your intentions throughout the whole game. You blow up a giant cannon aimed at San Francisco, and then he claims that you're the one who actually wanted to use it in the first place.
That's the heinous terrorist Metal Wolf, as seen from the air. He's trying to take over the Alcatraz cannon and destroy the West Coast.
Or Chicago is getting gassed and you stop the gas canisters. Well, actually, it was you who wanted to gas Chicago.
The US military has been demolished once again by Metal Wolf. However, his plan to gas the town ended in failure.
Then, at the end of the game, after you rescue the hostages on the Statue of Liberty, he says this.
Metal Wolf was the truly righteous one. While the world may have doubted you, I always believed in you. Thank you, Metal Wolf, and thank you, Michael Wilson.
Whatever.
I also think the voice acting is the main point to bring up. Because at a first glance, the voice acting in Metal Wolf is weird.
The Vice President Richard Hawke waits for you in Las Vegas. My only advice to you is this. Beat him to a pulp.
Sometimes it feels stilted, sometimes you don't even know what the mood of a scene is supposed to be. However, I feel most people rush to make fun of this game's voice actors without even stopping to think about the game as a whole, because the entire game is kind of tongue-in-cheek.
The enemy forces have even captured San Francisco's cable cars. We can't let them get away with using the symbol of this great American city.
Entire levels are dedicated to one-off jokes about American iconography or pop culture. This is a game whose developers, as far as I'm concerned, were 100% aware of what they were doing.
We military men will never be cowardly lambs. We're brave lions until the end. Now carry out your duty. Carry out your own justice. Farewell, General!
Voice acting is usually seen by most people as just good or bad, just a linear scale. Not to me. There's way more to voice acting, and I find it's a balance between direction and the actor themselves putting their all into it. Like, sure, a voice performance might sound professional, might even have solid direction. However, is that performance at all entertaining? Or is it just boring? Boring voice acting can and will destroy a game. I think an infamous recent example of this is the English version of the RE4 remake. They recast the English voice actors of Ada, and holy shit, is her acting rough.
You can stop right there, Leon. Wouldn't make me use this.
This is the definition of a boring performance. Like, it's not awful. You can tell she's a professional actress. They didn't just get a random person off the street and put them in front of a mic. But she is so fucking uninterested in her dialogue. Listen to her.
Sorry, nothing yet. Just one question. What are you planning to do with this? You don't seem surprised. Maybe you'll live to meet me again. Everything will work out just fine.
It sounds like she's boring herself with her own lines.
Nothing personal, Leon. Luis and I had an arrangement.
When you hear this in a game, it just takes you out of the experience.
You look like you've got something to say.
Fucking A, I want some emotion here. Anyway, this was a long tangent, and I just wanted to get to the root of what I was getting at. Metal Wolf is the complete opposite of that.
You gonna complain? He's a coward. I can't win. So shoot me, Michael. Or are you a chicken?
This direction, you know what, I'll say it, is pretty awkward. And you kind of understand why. It's a Japanese team directing English-speaking actors. So of course there's a disconnect. However, even then, the English VAs are putting so much effort and heart into their goofy lines of dialogue that their performance just transcends that awkwardness and becomes downright amazing.
Have a nice day. Or not, Michael.
This is the case where the actors, despite the language barrier, all understand what kind of game they're in, and they are playing up the cheese to 110%.
That's quite a gentlemanly landing, sir, befitting only of a U.S. president.
The gentleman in me goes off the clock at 5 p.m.
You know how I said a lot of modern voice acting feels like the actors are too embarrassed to act, so they underdeliver? Yeah, that problem doesn't exist here.
Well, I love you too, Michael. I love you so much. I can't stand it. So much. I want to kill you.
It's clear that they are all having fun with their lines. They are all leaning into it, giving it their all. So even though the dialogue sounds goofy, you kind of just don't care anymore because the performance is so expressive and so much fun to listen to that, yeah, the game unironically becomes kind of great. It's hard to describe, but I genuinely started loving these characters.
Hello, Michael. How's life treating you?
I can't turn my back on a friend, and the reason is, I'm the President of the United States.
The standout here is Richard's voice actor. I've looked him up and he's only done a handful of VA roles, but fuck me, this man deserves an award for how much he's chewing the scenery.
Oh, Michael, you're so sweet. Hey there, Michael. Are you still playing the hero?
Richard!
You just don't get it, do you? Freedom is dead. You and your men and this symbol of freedom will all perish. And for that, I owe you. You canceled all my dreams and plans. So now I've got a nice little present for you. Here. Way to go, Mr. President.
There's a good series of interviews with FromSoftware producer Masanori Takeuchi, who mentioned that an inspiration from Michael and Richard's rivalry came directly from professional wrestling, which, honestly, that kind of explains everything about this game's writing.
Be certain now. As certain as the blood gushing out of your nose when I bash it in. Be certain of your death here and now. We've got the stage all to ourselves. It ends here.
Because yeah, the voice acting could be better. You could have better direction. And even the one-liners themselves could have been written a little better.
Oh, you are so sweet, Michael. Like gulping a cup of condensed milk.
However, this game is just pure fun. You can tell that all the actors are having so much fun with their dialogue. The characters are just hilarious. When I played through Metal Wolf, I had a big goofy smile on my face the entire way through. Richard alone should be a gaming icon.
Thanks to him, the people of New York City are right now festively running around and trying to escape.
I should probably talk about the boss fights before we wrap this up. On pretty much every level, you're going to be encountering a boss fight. Sometimes it's near the end of the level, other times it's the entire level itself. And to the game's credit, there's a lot of variety in these enemy types. Sometimes it's a giant tank or a helicopter, sometimes it's another mech or a group of mechs. One level has this utterly massive airship that you have to destroy. I'd say that most of the boss fights are pretty good, although some of them are a little annoying. And then there's one that's questionable to the point where I'm not even sure if I beat it correctly. So right away, the Phoenix boss fight was the best one. Actually, I think Phoenix is just my favorite mission, period. It's a giant Wild West town, like I said earlier, but it's also super fast to play through. You can really zoom through it, ducking between buildings, all the while these 3 cloaked mechs are trying to stop you. So it's a bit of a cat and mouse, trying not to get stuck in a fight with all 3 of them at once, and instead trying to pick them off one by one. It's great. The airship one was pretty good. Okay, I hated the boss fight on the bridge, especially because it's timed. In fact, I hated a lot of the timed missions for that matter. They just sucked. I appreciate levels where I have time to explore and find secrets, and not having a fucking countdown timer on the top of the screen, forcing me to miss parts of the mission. The New York boss fight was weird. This mission had you destroy this giant robot spider. It's a pretty in-depth stage too. You have all these buildings and streets as this giant mech chases after you. The game tells me to destroy these towers located around the level, which will then weaken its electromagnetic armor before before I actually fight it. Alright, sounds good to me. Well, I destroyed a couple towers, then I noticed how low his health was. So I thought, wait, can I just kill him outright? So I used my special attack move on him, and yeah, I killed him immediately. Mission success. Even with over half of the objectives still left. What? I still don't know what's going on with this level. Is the boss fight just bugged? Was he nerfed in the re-release? Or is the game always like this? I have no idea. Like I said, Richard's boss fight is fucking agony. Actually, his first fight's pretty good. You encounter him in Las Vegas, and it's pretty fun. He's spouting off good one-liners, you're smashing through slot machines. I got major Duke Nukem Forever 2001 vibes from this. Might just be me. After this, he fires a rocket into space, where he boards a space station that he just so happens to have for some reason. Oh god, this mission. Well, first it starts off with a timer, which that on its own would be pretty annoying, although I do admit the game only times you for the first half and it does give you plenty of time to do it. But the second part involves the boss fight, where you face off against Richard and his spider tank Mech. Fucking hell, he's a tough bastard. The problem is that in his second phase, he is constantly firing off these homing rockets, which you can sometimes shoot out of the air thanks to the game's generous auto-aim, but he fires them non-stop. It gets to the point where there are too many to even keep track of, so you just get pelted over and over and fucking die. It took me way too many attempts to beat this guy. I was hoping that since his rocket launchers are at the top of his mech, that I'd be safe and out of range if I hid right underneath him. Maybe hiding under his cone of fire, kind of like the Halo 3 Scarab. But no, his attacks can still hit you. So I died, and died, and died. And only on my last attempt did I decide to be a bitch, and I hid behind this little wall on the side of the room. Yeah, what a heroic battle. Just the president hiding behind a wall taking potshots at his VP. But hey, I finally beat him. Take that, Richard, you motherfucker. The game ends with the space station breaking apart into Earth's atmosphere, while Michael does some sick moves. Also, even as he's about to be vaporized in the fucking thermosphere, Richard is still a prick.
It was your methods that were flawed. Our love for America won't change. Richard!
This is one eternal flame with your justice.
And that's the game. After you beat it though, you do have access to a little bit of endgame content. First, you have access to two new modes, Fever Mode and Hell Mode. Fever Mode just gives you infinite ammo. Hell Mode is an even harder difficulty. There are also apparently aliens now to find in each level as an additional bonus to unlock. You can also unlock skins by completing each level on Hell Mode. I appreciate that the game does still give you an incentive to keep playing the old levels. Hell Mode is a good incentive to force you to research and develop all of your higher end guns, but yeah, that's kind of it. I do wish there was a proper New Game Plus mode, like letting you play out the campaign in a linear progression again, but with your current unlocks. But I guess this is pretty good for what it's worth, because for as little as this game is, there's very clearly a lot of love put into it. And it especially makes sense when you consider just how tiny of a dev team there was to develop it. The best I can tell, this seems to have been kind of a side project for FromSoftware. They have multiple teams working on different projects at any given time, and apparently for Metal Wolf, they had a very small team working on the entire game. I believe it was like 30 developers in total. The way this game came about was pretty interesting, and I learned a lot through those interviews with Takeuchi. Like I said earlier, it stemmed mostly from Microsoft desperately wanting the original Xbox to gain a foothold in the Japanese market. This seemed to be a recurring thing for Xbox during that time, even if it never worked. I'm not quite sure why the Xbox always seemed to fail in Japan. Maybe it has to do with the kind of first and third person shooters and action games just not being as popular over there, or maybe competition with Sony and Nintendo were just that fierce. Either way, Metal Wolf was created from a desire to make a game for the Japanese market exclusive to the Xbox. So they reached out to FromSoft, a pretty desirable studio given their track record. By the time they made Metal Wolf, they had already made quite a few Xbox exclusives at that point, and even another mecha game. Although somewhere down the line, they decided that since the Xbox was an American console, this game should be as American as humanly possible. So what's more American than playing as the American president, using revolvers and assault rifles, and fighting with your running mate? I'm not quite sure why they went with a mecha action game. Maybe that was just what FromSoft was known for at the time. But yeah, the Armored Core team did come in to give the Metal Wolf devs tips on implementing mech gameplay, but also, more importantly, to make their game feel unique and not like an Armored Core clone. So stuff like the game being super arcadey and bombastic came directly from them trying to make Metal Wolf distinct from Armored Core. When the game did come out, it was regarded as this weird cult classic. Again, a Japanese exclusive Xbox game. I can't recall many others like that. It was a game that only some people who were able to import it could play. Hell, I don't even know if you can emulate this game. So its rarity combined with its unique Japanese perspective on American culture cemented itself as a prized possession among Xbox collectors. I guarantee if you meet any Xbox game collector out there, they would kill to have a copy of Metal Wolf sitting on their shelf. Hell, I would. So, with a lot of demand for this game, a PC port was finally released. In 2019, FromSoft teamed up with Devolver Digital, and they finally brought the game to PC and other platforms, where it still remains today. It's nice to finally have it, and honestly, I wish more devs adopted this practice. Let me say, as someone who plays primarily on PC, I am more than happy getting PC ports of old games. You don't have to remake them or remaster them, just give me that janky old console game so it can be preserved forever. I would be happy to buy it. The last thing I thought was interesting about these handful of interviews is that Takeuchi kind of implied that this re-release was FromSoftware testing the waters for getting back into the mech genre. One interview, he literally alluded to the fact that Metal Wolf was them dipping their toe in the water to ultimately see if a new Armored Core game could be warranted later down the line. Well, this interview was in June of 2019, and almost 4 years to the day later, we have Armored Core 6 on the horizon. I thought that was pretty neat foreshadowing. So yeah, that's Metal Wolf Chaos. And you know what? This game really charmed me. Going into it at first, I think I definitely felt the game was nothing more than an Xbox oddity. But the more time I spent with it, the more it really grew on me. There's a lot to love about it, and even with its frustrating moments, there's still a really fun game here. Funny dialogue and humor aside, the gameplay is itself still pretty fun, and the progression system still had me spending way more time in the game than I expected. Exploring each level, grinding for money and resources, it's a fun little game that has plenty of content and a lot of soul too. I still really like the mechanics they introduced here, and I would definitely love to see them expanded out in another game. Being able to upgrade your weapons, grinding for rare metal and cash, although I'm pretty sure I don't want a direct sequel. Knowing how games are made and written these days, I doubt any modern developer, even FromSoftware, could match the amazingness that was the original Metal Wolf Chaos. I guess I just don't trust anyone making a game like this today. It's a perfect time capsule, a wonderful trip back to 2004. I feel like when people think back to old consoles like the OG Xbox, they always think of the big name titles. But I think what's lost are the little games like this. The smaller, weirder titles. The cult classics made by tiny developers. They were odd, sometimes unbalanced, even annoyingly hard in some parts. But they always had so much character and they were so unique that it kind of made up for all of it. These were the games that defined the console for me. Because as you bought a game that you never heard of before, only because the cover looks cool, you never quite knew what you were going to get. I sadly never got a chance to play Metal Wolf until it was ported to PC, but wow, it really was a blast of 6th gen nostalgia. Everything about this game brought me back to the golden age of the Xbox, and I'm glad I was able to revisit it. It's definitely not for everyone, but if you're someone like me who grew up on the OG Xbox, then I think it's at least worth checking out. But yeah, that's the video. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you all take it easy this 4th. Enjoy your hot dogs, have fun watching the fireworks, and take care. I'll see you next time. Richard!